Hello everybody and welcome back to Ursa Minor Sewing. Today I wanted to do a quick video to talk to you guys about interfacing and how to use them. So first of all, what is interfacing? Interfacing is a product that you use to either change the drape of a fabric or to give a fabric stability. There's two different types of interfacing. There's sew-in interfacing and there's fusible interfacing. Sew-in interfacing is usually another fabric. It doesn't necessarily have to be a qualifying interfacing. There are actual woven interfacings out there, but you can also use other fabrics. I made the discovery the other day while working at the dress shop that the manufacturer my boss uses peau de soie as an interfacer for really lightweight wispy fabrics. And peau de soie is actually this stuff here. It's the same fabric that I'm using to make my Princess Peach costume out of. They don't use pink though. Another type of fabric you can use as an interfacing is silk organza, right here. And this is a workhorse fabric. You could use it as an interfacing or as a garment piece, but you can see it's lightweight, but it has a bit of stiffness to it, so it provides some stability as well. Fusible interfacing, not really sure how to describe it to you. Sometimes it's woven, like this piece of fusible here is woven, but sometimes it's kind of got a felted look to it, almost like if you've ever looked inside an air filter for your vacuum cleaner or your furnace, it's kind of felted looking, and that's what this is here. The stiffer ones tend to be felted. This is a fairly stiff one here. And then you've got your lighter weight ones, which are more woven. What makes fusible interfacing fusible is it has a little layer of glue on it that, once heat activated by your iron, sticks to your fabric. Now, just a tip on choosing your interfacing is if you're not sure whether or not your fabric is capable of taking a fusible interfacing, because not all are, stick with a sew-in interfacing. It's safer and there's no chance you're going to mess up with it, because if you put a fusible interfacing on a fabric that doesn't really like being fused, you're going to flip it over and discover the drape isn't quite what you want, because the glue adds a little bit of stiffness once it's dried. And also you might see glue spots through the fabric, you might have heat marks from your iron. So it's a good idea to do a little research on the fabric, the self fabric you're going to be using, before you pick an interfacing for it. It's real easy to jump on the fusible right away because it's easy, you just stick your iron on it and done. But sometimes doing the little extra bit of work it takes to put sew-in interfacing is the better route to go. Yeah, a good book actually for that is Sandra Betzina's Fabric Savvy. She talks a lot in there about what fabrics will take as far as interfacing, whether or not you need to shrink your fabric before you use it, what kind of needles you should use, what kind of thread, so on and so forth. So check that book out, it's a good read. Okay, so I'm actually right here. Oh, another tip is certain items in your garment absolutely need to be interfaced. So for example, your collar has two parts to it. It's got the public side and it's got the under collar. The under collar needs to be interfaced. If you have a button placket anywhere, that needs to be interfaced. The seam line that a zipper is going to go into needs to be interfaced. A facing needs to be interfaced. Otherwise, it's not going to give you the drape that you want. Another tip on interfacing is you need to cut it out with the same grain line that you cut your fabric piece out. Otherwise, it's going to ruin the drape also. So if you cut your pattern piece out with a straight of grain, you need to cut your interfacing out with a straight of grain, because if you cut your interfacing out on, say, a cross grain, it's going to mess up, it's going to torque your fabric piece out of alignment, because a cross grain is slightly more stretchy than a straight grain, but that's for a completely different video. So how about I show you here how to apply a fusible, because it's pretty straightforward how to put in a sew-in. You just first of all, you need to cut your interfacing out with the same pattern piece you cut your main public fabric out of. Don't just fuse it on and then cut it out, otherwise you're going to get your ironing board all sticky. Then you, with a sewing, you just baste about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch into your seam allowance. Oh, you shush. And then, yeah, baste. So that means you just zip up one side, then up the other, down the other. Don't just sew and then stop and then pivot. You need to sew from one edge to the other, sew right off the edge, and then sew onto the edge and then off the edge of another edge, and so on and so forth all the way around. With a fusible, now I've got a lightweight one here. I'm doing this on a lining fabric because the lining isn't as stable as I want it to be. It's pretty floppy. So I'm going to give it a little bit of oomph. And this also will provide a little extra cushioning as well against the public seams of my fabric. So I've taken the glue side, and you always know on a fusible because it feels a bit rough compared to the other side. And I'm going to lay it down so that all of my edges match. And I've got my iron set up on a fairly low steam setting, but I'm not using steam. You don't want to steam this. And this just went on power saver, so I'm going to wake it up. And you just take your iron and set it on top, then don't hold it for very long, maybe about 5 to 6 seconds. And you're going to lift and place it down again. Don't iron, because that will change the shape of the threads and torque your fabric. And again, up and move. That's the difference between pressing and ironing, but again, that's for a different video. Up and move. Let's have a look. See, it's stuck to my ironing board. So this is okay. There was a bit of a pucker in my interfacing, so I'm just going to give that a reheat. I'm just going to grab the interfacing and just give it a little pull while it's under my iron. And flip it over. The last thing you want is permanent puckers in your work. That just doesn't look very professional, or it's very unsightly. And the great thing about this interfacing is the glue is not incredibly strong. Most interfacings don't have very strong glue. It's just strong enough to get it stuck to your fabric long enough that you can sew your garment together. Okay, so I got the pucker out of my interfacing. And sometimes it's just a matter of peeling it back a little bit and applying some heat. And there it is. And the drape of the fabric has completely changed. I'll show you. See, this is the fabric before I interfaced it. This is after. See, it's a little bit stiffer, but it still has that nice soft drapey feel. Okay. Now I'll show you with my other fusible here. Pot de soie is already a fairly, I won't say stiff drape, but it holds itself up pretty well. But I'm going to put a stiffer interfacing to it because I'm going to be putting beading on this, and I want this fabric to hold up well. So again, you use your pattern piece to cut out a similar piece to your fabric, and again, just direct heat, straight down, straight up, no ironing. Some fusible interfacings require you to apply a little bit of steam, but this one in the directions said dry iron. Okay, let's have a look. Oh. Need to go a little hotter, it looks like. Just crank the heat up. I have this here, I may as well use it as a press cloth. It's another thing you can use organza for, is pressing. And generally with the stiffer fabrics too, or the stiffer interfacings, you may have to go a little longer with your press. So instead of 5 seconds, go for more like 8 or 10, because you really want that interfacing to stick. And again, it's not supposed to be a permanent stick, it's just a stick long enough for you to run it through your sewing machine and get your garment put together, because as soon as you put this garment through the wash, that glue is going to disappear. But your interfacing and the stability that it is meant to provide will still be left behind. Okay, that time it worked. I just had to turn the heat up a little bit. And you'll see the fabric is, the drape is completely changed. It's pretty much stiff as a board. See, this is my fabric before I interfaced it. Here's after. It's practically stiff as a board. So that is interfacing and how to use it. I hope you find this video interesting and helpful. Until next time, happy sewing, guys.